I'm pleased to welcome David Cramer, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of National Storage Affiliates. David has served in this role since April of this year, and prior to April, David served as President and CEO of Secure Care, the predecessor company to NSA. David's got more than 22 years experience in the self-storage industry and also serves as a board member of the SBOA tenant insurance program. So welcome and thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Great to see you again.
Sure. So you've been in the industry longer than a lot of the folks who currently are active in the space. I'm also a member of that multi-decade fraternity. So what do you think are some of the evolutions that we've seen over the last 20 plus years that some of the newer folks take for granted?
It's a good question. It's hard to believe we've been at it this long too. I don't feel that old, but here we are. So, I really look at it. A lot of things have happened, but really it's technology and the internet. I can remember some of our first acquisitions when I came to the self-storage business. I came out of Target, the retail giant, who had technology and had reporting and had everything you wanted to study, to what I would call the Stone Ages in the storage business, where we were using ledger cards and the Tandy 1000 to open gates. It was a really step backwards. And so, I remember, first acquisitions bringing computers in, telling people that this mouse was okay. It wasn't a bad mouse. And really having these conversations with people and really say, okay, gosh, well, where are we today? And how did we get to this point? And if you really look at what's happened and what's evolved is shopping patterns and how people find us and what Google and all this internet practices, social media, telephones, all these things have done. We've gone to, having to be at a Yellow Page meeting to decide which bell book to buy in, and did we want a 3-page or a 4-page or a no page, and did our name have to start with an A, to make sure we're on the front page. To today, we have automated bidding platforms that can spend your money more wisely than we ever dreamed of. So, I think stepping in today, we're in a much better spot. And if you look what's in front of us in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be amazing how it continues to transform and really help us in our industry for our consumers.
Yeah, I bet no one under 40 even understands what double truck means.
I bet not. 2 pages on the Yellow Page book, which the Yellow Page book was a place where you found people.
Right. So somewhat along those same lines, what do you reminisce about before 2000 that we don't see as much of or any these days?
To me, I really look back, it was a calmer time. I mean, if you found a great facility, you purchased a great facility, you had a great team, you're able to really, be a little calmer and you weren't always on. I look back and say to ourselves, you ran great platforms, you had great people. And if the fax machine wasn't spitting out a report, things were okay. And today, it's busy. It's busy all the time. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but, you can't shut our world off today. And what that does, in your, as you look at family life and personal life and work life and all these things, that those times back in those days were, I would say, a little calmer, a little quieter. And, we still did a good job, but today we're always on.
Did you ever think we'd quantify value in IRRs and multiples in self-storage?
No. And get to the values we're at today? No. But I think it's a tribute to all the good people in the sector and how good a sector it is. And we really, I remember starting with this, everybody kept talking about us being a core product. Will we ever be a core product? And we were always that fringe, that kind of specialty, investment, not knowing much about us. And you look at what's happened in our sector, the success, the advancements, the amount of sheer talent in this sector today. I mean, there's tremendous talent across the board in this sector today. And yeah, it's really made us evolve into a much more sophisticated industry.
Yeah. What are you surprised isn't more of a focus given COVID? And what's something that you would think should be a main topic that isn't?
I think one of the things that jumps to my mind is the customer experience. If you look at what's going on because of COVID, what restaurants are doing, what retailers are doing, travel industry is doing, everything about them is changing because of the really true customer experience. And what does that mean for us? Because, as much as we've advanced for an online rental, have our facilities really morphed and changed to be more self-sufficient, more self-aware of what the consumer wants, coming and going, feeling safe, access, all those things. But, from a shopping experience. And I think that's going to, raise up a little bit here, the fact that I know we're focused on it, and the fact that I think the consumer's expectation is changing, and it's changing quickly. We joke about the Domino's pizza ad where they're throwing the box at the car and trying to put it in the back and stuff. But I mean, that's all real life. I mean, the customer wants to pull up, you take care of them, away you go. They want to do it on their terms, at their time, and their speed. So we got work to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. You stepped into your current role in April, so kind of interesting timing. I mean, I guess if you could have done March 13th, you would have hit the nail on the head. In any like, what have I gotten myself into? I mean, at what point did you breathe that sigh of relief that okay, the industry is going to be okay?
I think probably really around July, August, we really knew that things were turning around. I mean, there was a point in time where you started modeling downside, right? And when you start modeling downside, you're like, oh my goodness, is this true or is this false? We've been through the great financial crisis before, but that took 2 and 3 years to get to this really catastrophic point. And it seemed like overnight, everybody was unemployed and the world shut down. And so, we really had to be nimble and had to move. And, I really think by, July and August, we really had really good light of sight that things were improving. We'd adapted well. Fundamentals were coming back. And then you look at what's going on right now in the fourth quarter, record occupancies across the sector, great rental velocities. Things are working very well. And our sector and our industry is really shining right now. And so that leads you to where's it going? And that's something we'll all have to figure out when the world comes back to its new normal, in the next 6 to 8 months or whatever that's going to be.
What do you think something that's overplayed, especially in the context of current climate, COVID, et cetera?
We've been getting a lot of questions around this outward migration. Is it permanent? Is it not permanent? Is everybody really just going to move out of the cities? Are they not going to move out of the cities? Really hard to tell. I don't think we'll have a real good line of sight until, large companies start bringing people back. If you look at what Google did up in California, just by releasing everybody and say, go work across the world, right? Work wherever you want. And it's a great concept. The question is how many of those people will they want to bring back to their core operation in that particular facility in Northern California? And I think everybody's, can we put a stake in the ground that this is permanent, not permanent? What percentage is permanent? What's it doing to our business? What's it not doing to our business? A lot of emphasis put on that. I don't think there's a brick wall coming for our business when these things start to flow back in either. But I just think there's a lot of, at this point in time, way too much emphasis being put on what's happening there.
Kind of and I think to your point, it's not going to pivot. We're not going to come out of it like we got into it. And over time, we're probably talking years before the quote normal is established.
I think so. Yeah, I really do. I think, once we get the virus hopefully under control and get something that actually works from a vaccine perspective and, drugs that actually treat it when you have it. And then I think companies will look at how they reshape themselves, how effective we've been from home. And we've been really effective from home, what that does to travel, what that does to other expenses that they may want to trim, and then true office space. What do we want to spend for overhead? And if I was, picking San Francisco over Austin, Texas, I know where I would go. So,
I mean, the barbecue alone is worth a head.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So industry consolidation obviously is one of the hottest topics. What do you see there near term? And I mean, is this pace sustainable? What's your macro and maybe a little bit more of a micro view on consolidation?
I think currently right now, I think there's a big push this quarter due to, political environment, tax changes that could be on the horizon. There's a lot of things going on right now that have spooked a few folks. And so I think acquisition activity, particularly the next 2 months, has been very vibrant and will continue to be vibrant because of those changes. And then I think as you start to look farther out, what happens with our economy, what happens with the economic conditions, when do things settle down? There's certainly a lot of capital looking to get into the space. We've had great results. We will, continue in our path to acquire smartly and very assertively where we can. And, so I do think, from a consolidation standpoint, there's lots of buyers, and I think there will be sellers as we go forward.
Do you think the pace continues and it just continues to expand into secondary, tertiary. I mean, I think just me personally, if I can editorialize for a minute, we struggle with secondary and tertiary because business is business, and as long as you can manage the margins, it really doesn't matter. You're managing risk, and as long as pricing reflects the risk.
That's right.
It does seem like there has been a hesitation until maybe the last 12, 14 months to enter some of those markets, but a lot of those are the markets that you guys have been in the whole time, and you've seen the value there this entire time. I mean, are you going to see more competition in these markets? Because I think people's understanding of the business is just expanding their geographic net.
I do think we'll see some pressure. I also think there is a level of investor where it just doesn't check all the boxes. Type of facility, market dynamics, demographics, where they just haven't shifted their focus away from what their customary investment model looks like. So I do think we'll see a little more pressure. I think we'll see a few more investors head that way. I don't think we'll see a rapid change moving to those markets just because of factors that are in these people's modeling and what their expectations are.
Yeah. So what do you think some of the industry specific headwinds are? I mean, obviously we've got macroeconomic, political. I mean, there's things that affect us all. What are headwinds specific to storage?
I think we still have a supply situation going on. I mean, it's been masked. We've had great results. We've had great rental velocities, but there's still a lot of product to be absorbed in some of these markets. And that's being overshadowed right now. I also am concerned because we've done so well that doesn't fuel it again and maybe keep the pace of new supply coming our way. As some of these markets maybe recover quicker, some of these assets get sold a little quicker, as we work through this supply cycle, that we're in. And so that would be one I think that could face, and, not maybe across 100% of the country, but certainly some markets will feel more pressure than others. And as you look, we talk about one of our markets, we look at Phoenix. There's a ton of product coming on just now in Phoenix. And, we'll be talking about Phoenix in 12 months and 18 months about how much product really came into this market that isn't being talked about today, right? Everything is pretty rosy right now. And so that's in front of us. And then I do think economic conditions, there's a lot of unemployment. There's a lot of uncertainty of what the actual, when the dust settles, what's our world going to look like and our economy going to look like, and what areas are hit more than other areas. And, I think those are probably two of the headwinds we're probably most cautious and a little concerned about.
Do you think new supply continues? Are there projects that aren't under construction today that are going to be under construction in 4 months? Do you think it takes a while to kind of get everybody comfortable again? I mean, where are we in that new supply cycle?
I think anything that was being built is starting to be completed. They were certainly 4 to 6 months behind because of, supply problems, permit problems, inspection problems. The city shut down. It really made it hard on people to get things completed. And so I think all those projects that were under construction will get wrapped up and be, brought to us here in the next 6 months. Stuff in the planning stages will slowly work its way through. Again, cities probably being the biggest problem here is getting things approved right now has been, problematic, at best, to get people to really work through the process and paperwork. And then I think the new stuff, we see a lot of developments for sale. I think some of those will trade and they will get built, for the people who don't want to build them today. And then I think just, if you look at the success in the sector, I just think it's going to open the door for somebody to come back and look at this again and say, man, what a great place to be. And so, it's a great thing for us, and it could be, harmful for us as well. So,
I mean, I think the return trade versus what else most capital looks at.
Right.
We definitely benefit by comparison.
Right.
The lack of ongoing capital intensity. I mean, it doesn't cost us $30 a foot to re-tenant office space or $40 a foot to re-tenant retail. Assuming there's a retail tenant that wants the space. I think there's you could see compression in development targets simply because the alternative outside of the storage industry, I think it's going to kind of make the case for itself.
I agree. And
so lease ups, I mean, you mentioned that. Do you think revenue management algorithms, do you think the effectiveness is flattening?
It's a good question. I certainly think everything is modifying. If you look at what all of us are studying and look at historical patterns to what we're dealing with now, with compression of street rates and now street rates back up again, and you look at life cycles of tenants, how quickly and how assertively you can hit them. I think all of our modeling is changing. The old models may have flattened a little bit and the effectiveness may have flattened. So now you got to change your parameters and you got to look at your parameters. Can I hit quicker? Can we be more assertive? Can I take the caps off of what I believe a customer should be above street? There's a lot of things that we're all doing internally that I think will keep them vibrant, but we do have to rethink them and then remodel them. And that's normal. I think we'll work our way through that.
Do you think with the rapid physical lease up, but the slowed down, economic or revenue lease up, when do we kind of get back into equilibrium where, we're proformaing rents 3 years from now is a, there's a little intellect in that exercise.
Right. It's a good question. The non-stable stuff we're looking at definitely 18 to 24 months before we start to find back into that third year where we think we're going to get comfortable that, that spread of where it should have been to where it got leased at. It works its way out. And that's a lot of our markets we look at, 18, 24 months, and up to 3 years from now on the non-stable stuff that we are looking at. And that's not empty. This is stuff that's already somewhere in its fill-up curve, somewhere in its fill-up life. Obviously supply is going to weigh in on that. What happens in the market's going to weigh in on that. And then, from an existing customer in their life cycle, there's only so many rate increases they'll take, and there's only a certain frequency they'll take. And then at some point in time, you just have to wait it out. And so, I know particularly for us internally, we're looking at, can we be a little quicker and a little more assertive on the rate increases and really try to make up that gap a little sooner than we normally would.
Would you be comfortable today projecting where rents would be on a development deal 3 years from now?
I don't know that I would be. Certain markets, yes. Certainly we have a good line of sight on certain markets. Other markets, no. I just don't know. Guess what we talked about earlier? New supply, economic conditions. We're doing our best, and we've got a little more comfortable as we model, for the next 24 months. But it's still, a little bit of unknown.
So what a question coming from one of the viewers is a market like Augusta, small market, 1 million square feet or so of projected development is coming online. How does a market like Augusta or any small market like that with such a new supply numerator over a denominator that's not too much bigger than that, how does it absorb that space?
Slowly would be the word I would use. Within Augusta too, and it's a good question, is where is that new supply being built? What does it do to your trade rings? And at what point in time is there so much that it just really collapses, really puts a lot of pressure on the entire market. Within Augusta, we have stores across that market, and there are certainly pockets of that market very hot, still doing very well, and then the rest of that supply is really putting downward pressure on it. And it's a really good question. And we know Augusta's on our target that it's going to be a long, slow grow out of it. There is population growth, which is a good thing. There is a good, stable economy built around, a lot of it around the military base, which houses the Army's, kind of technology department, if you want to call it that. They're so it's a very stable economy that way, but it's a slow grower as well. So it will take time.
So you're in a unique position in that your structure affords you some oversight to multiple markets with multiple operating platforms, which means operating philosophies, strategies, et cetera. We're in what is typically the flattening part of the leasing season, if not the slowing part as you move your way north and east. How have you seen, what's the contrast? What are some of the complementary ways that we're extending this leasing season that we're hearing, kind of industry-wide across the nation? Given your unique position of seeing not just different geographies, but different operating philosophies, is everybody achieving kind of the same ultimate result of growing occupancy and growing rates in a time that is usually flat to maybe even down a little?
Yes, and it's a little unnerving, right? We're sitting here in the fourth quarter where you're typically working very hard to maintain and not fall off on typical occupancy levels, and really winding your ear down on revenue numbers. Typically these times of years you're backing off a little bit. Across all of our portfolio, we've had success and strength pretty much everywhere. A little bit of pressure, I would say, in the oil markets. We're feeling a little pressure around Louisiana, a little pressure in Midland, Odessa, those places. We don't have a large exposure there, but if you had to pick pieces that are struggling a little bit more, those markets are certainly feeling the lack of oil field workers and some of the slowdown that's happened in those sectors. But across the board, we have a great structure with our pros. We have bi-weekly best practice meetings. We get to share a lot of data. We talk a lot amongst ourselves, and the general sentiment across the board is everybody is very, very pleased. We've been able to have great rental velocity. Move outs still remain muted. We've been able to navigate all the restrictions that have been imposed on us as far as, price gouging and what we can do as far as rate increases and kind of work our way through all the different places we have to work our way through. But at this point in time, everybody's done a great job as usual. I look at it as I'm blessed. I get to hang around these folks. We get to have a lot of conversations. They get to influence me probably more than I influence them, and just a really good operation. And everybody's been very assertive, and they're pushing on street. They're pushing on in-place tenants, and we're doing everything we can to maximize what's in front of us right at the moment.
Do you? How would you characterize storage demand today? Given that we've seen this leasing season extend, you're seeing across most, if not all, your pros, maybe with the exception of a couple of markets. Do we have a new normal for rate of use, or how do you characterize demand?
Good question. I'm pleased that more people are using storage than ever, and I think that's always good. I think people have been introduced to our product, realized how it can work for a variety of situations or a variety of events, how easy it is to use, how effective it is. I think all the storylines we're hearing from work at home, teach at home, use the gym at home, all the way across the board, parents who had to bring their kids back home because they're not working in a different part of the country. I think there's a lot of storylines playing into that. Plus, we have a red-hot housing market. Now it's last month slowed down a little bit, but there's a red-hot housing market out there, which always causes demand for us, and that transition is good for us. And then you have businesses operating at 25% capacity, so tables and chairs and all this other stuff that they had to make room for, have introduced into our product. So, yeah, I think this demand is unique. I don't think it's going away anytime short term. I think it works its way out as our economy starts to get back to what a new normal looks like. And then I do think there's a lingering effect of people said, I like it. I want to keep my gym at home. I'm going to keep my office at home. And I'm going to use the product longer than I thought I would because it's convenient.
Do you think that this, this increased rate of use then which I think I tend to agree with you, there's some level of it that might, be a kind of a reset to the upside. Mm-hmm. What does that do for new development? If we've seen a slowdown, do we see it ramp back up and kind of back to the institutional capital finding its way into the space and folks expanding the definition of the markets into which they'll invest? Is this all, are we building some momentum that's kind of being artificially held back by COVID of more demand, and is it going to be that catastrophic? Do we have the rate of use increase to offset some of that?
New development will be tricky. I would be caution. I'd caution anybody with new development because I do think we are having high levels of demand that we haven't seen before, which again gobbled up some of the supply that we knew we were oversupplied with. And so, as this shakes out, we'll see some cracks come back into some of these markets where we just have too much product because there will not be enough usage, right, to absorb all of that. I think this plays out, economically plays out, who knows, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, who knows how long it's going to take to really settle down into what the new normal looks like. What I do know is we're tracking, the move-out activity is picking up. And so the move-out activity is starting to look a little bit more normal. I think that has to do that people are out, they're able to get out, they're able to move around, they're able to be more effective. If we lock the country down, then that might slow that trend down a little bit. But that's something to pay attention to. Move-out activity has been very muted for a few months now, and we see them returning to more normal levels. Factor that in. I think it's where occupancy heads.
Do you, at its current pace, 2022, 2023? If we didn't have another huge inflection of new supply, do we kind of revert to equilibrium in 2 years?
I think so. I think somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah, I really do. I think all of it will be sorted out by then, provided economic. There's some wild cards to that, right? Economic conditions don't go terribly bad, and we have some other problem facing us that we haven't seen yet.
You think moratoriums in places like Miami and the boroughs, and I mean, are we going to see more of that?
If I had to guess, I'd say yes. I think tax pressure is going to put pressure on municipalities as well, because municipalities are going to be very strapped for taxes. That's the other side we haven't really talked about, what's happening within these cities. And as we all know, I mean, there are higher and best uses for taxes. Now the question is, will there be anybody to do those higher and best uses? That's another question. So, the cities may decide it's better to have a storage there than an empty building. So
I mean, do we just displace the concentration of supply outside of the areas that are controlled by the moratoriums? I mean, does a 3-mile market then become a 5-mile? Because if you need storage, you're just gonna have to drive. I mean, you think that ultimately is the effect?
I think it is to some point, and I also think it causes people to say, I will not drive 5 miles, and maybe I don't store anymore either. You have to balance that factor out, as well as how much they want to travel to it. But yeah, it definitely pushes it into that outer ring of where you can build. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You buy into the notion that there's going to be massive amounts of distress?
I do not. Been at this a long time. We know that historically these things can generate enough cash to survive. So maybe the success stories aren't as big, about how great it was, but I haven't seen a lot of distressed properties in my 22 plus years. So they just aren't out there. And so what I think will happen is you'll see people trading properties that didn't hit their fill-up curves, probably didn't hit their original projections, deciding that they, want to move on to something differently or change what they're thinking about. And I think, it's an acquisition opportunity. We're all studying that going forward, but that's the way I'd probably look at it.
Yeah, I mean, disappointment, not distress.
That's right. There you go. That's a good word for it.
I think a lot of what we've seen, in the however long, you want to define the time. The distress comes from capital structure. Somebody ultimately buys the site, and it's successful for them when the capital stack is right sized. So
that's right.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to transition into a more interesting line of questioning. So rumor is you and your wife like to travel to Napa. So you're a wine connoisseur, I hear.
I don't know if I'm a connoisseur. I do know I love to travel to Napa, and what I do know is the last wine of the day I buy is usually the worst one. By the time with your third wine tasting, everything tastes good.
So, in any of your favorite spots impacted by the fires last month?
Yeah, there was one place we call the Castle. It's up in Calistoga, and it actually had 2 of its outbuildings burnt, and so it was really a sad event for them. Most of their wine product was not there; it was in the warehouse, but that's a place that holds, a nice Oktoberfest and holds some medieval dinners. And it's just a fun place. And if you ever get a chance to go, it's a true castle they brought over from Europe, and they actually rebuilt it here. And it's just a really neat place. And they have great wine as well, but just a neat place to visit. But they had some fire problems where it actually burnt a couple outbuildings and created a little problem for their vineyards. And I think what I would say too is we're just missing that experience, as we all are. It's great that we can get together and talk and do these type of things, but if you really look at all of our lives and what's been affected, there's some of these fun things you like to do that have just been tabled, and so we had our first virtual wine tasting event about a month ago, and it was fun, but it just wasn't the same, right?
Yep. Yep. Well, that's kind of why I want to take the line of questioning in a slightly different direction, see if we can lighten the mood a little bit and learn something about the people of the industry, not just about the industry.
Absolutely.
I mean, Napa is one of my wife's and my favorite vacations. I mean, Calistoga Ranch is our favorite spot there, which unfortunately took quite a beating last month. So that whole kind of north central, northeastern part of the valley has just been absolutely hammered.
Yeah, it's we're fortunate to do what we do, because there's a lot of others out there that are really, really struggling and suffering with what things they can't control. It's just really sad.
So you get a call from one of your managers, maybe Cleveland, Ohio. We'll stick close to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for this question. They cut the lock on a delinquent unit, and there, right in front of all of the stuff stored in this delinquent unit, is a 1959 Les Paul. Does that guitar ever make it? Does that unit ever make it to the auction block?
Well, in the picture, there wouldn't be a guitar. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, the unit makes it to auction. Yes, it goes through the process. As hard as it would be to watch somebody else buy that thing, we're very strict about what happens and how we handle things. And,
so yeah. you're a collector of guitars, I hear. What, any particular type?
I've had all kinds. I've got Gibson, Fender, Paul Reed Smith. I have Ovation and Taylor on the acoustic side. I like to play, and I like to buy. I not necessarily, have to be the connoisseur of the old stuff. You get into some of the custom shops for Fender and Gibson, it's amazing what you can buy that's better than the old stuff. So, it may look like a 1960s Les Paul, but it's all brand new and it works very well. So,
how did you start collecting guitars?
I started playing when I was 9 years old. I was in a band through high school, a little bit in college. So I have my first guitars that I ever bought, that my folks actually bought for me. So, one of my first guitars was a 71 SG Deluxe, and I still have it today. And you just go along the way. And I'm very fortunate, Naomi, my wife, she treats me very nicely around Christmas time. So a new guitar will show up here and there. That's always fun. So, I think I have 18 now. I just enjoy having them, enjoy playing with them. And I need to be in the basement because it gets noisy for the neighbors. So you got to be careful.
What genre do you like to play?
Growing up, late 70s and 80s was probably the most influential on me. And so you look back, there's all kinds of weird things happening there, from AC/DC to Tom Petty to, go down the list of Foreigner. I have a little harder edge. So for me, the early 80s stuff, with the hair bands is definitely on my playlist. And then, today I've kind of stuck with it, Shine Down, Stereo Side, Hinders is around my playlist.
So were you an Eddie Van Halen fan as an Axeman or as a Van Halen guitarist?
He was a great guitarist, and it was, just phenomenal guitarist. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was in college in Casper, Wyoming, I was a bartender at one of the bars. And the Hilton was the happening place, and we were at the Holiday Inn, and busy time, and at that time, Oilfield was hot, really, really busy. And Van Halen was in town with Sammy Hagar. And so you get a call that says, hey, they've rented the top floor of the hotel. You need to come over. And so, you get there, and it's one wild party on the top floor of the Hilton. And I got to meet Sammy and Eddie and Michael Anthony and all of them. So it was a really, really good experience. Yeah.
So in your opinion, who's the most influential guitar player? I mean, are you like an Yngwie Malmsteen, or are you a Joe Satriani?
I'm probably a little more simplistic when it comes to that. Obviously Van Halen's presence, but I'm more of a, George Lynch, Richie Sambora. And then I think Prince. If you listen to Prince's guitar work, he was phenomenal.
Yep. Yep. So you also like to play golf. Have you played golf with many storage folks?
Not enough. I love to play golf, just never have the time. So it's a tough thing. But
who's the best golfer in storage?
Well, it's definitely not me. I can tell you that. I did hear an interesting rumor, and this this Ian Bernstein guy out there. I hear he's got this like virtual thing in his basement. So if you have to take an outside edge, coming out of COVID and stuff, I'm thinking Ian might be the best golfer in storage here soon. So we'll have to see what turns out.
Yeah, I think I need to be invited to that.
I agree. Yeah.
So Steve Stricker calls in sick for the Ryder Cup in September. And you get tapped as captain. Who are your 6 captain's picks?
Oh, that's a really hard one. Obviously the top 6 are picked. So I like people like Webb Simpson, Patrick Reed, Finau. Gary Woodland, Michael Wolff would probably be in that list. Maybe a Patrick Cantley. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to leave Tiger off. As much as I think he's was a phenomenal golfer, I just don't know from the Ryder Cup perspective he's able to do it much anymore. So,
yeah. I completely agree with you on the play side. I think having his leadership on the course, and I'd be more than happy for him to tank some rounds to give a shot to the young guys to really compete. I mean, he was a phenomenal captain, I thought, this last time.
I agree. I wish you could balance it out. I would agree with that 100%. But you just look. There's a younger generation coming, and they're certainly really good. So.
Yep. So just going to make sure we don't have any questions from the audience before we continue with this line of questioning. You think DJ repeats in 4 months?
I think it's going to be hard. I think the course in the spring was much different than the course he played this time. I mean, And so I think he'll still be very, very good. I just think the course is different. It's harder. Putts a lot harder. It's harder to really hit the shots he hit, and the scoring level he's at. So I'm going to say no. I think somebody else, steps in and gets it.
Yep. I think CT Pan, Patrick Reed, and Abraham Answer are probably my three for April. The way they played, I think I think they would have been a whole lot more competitive.
I agree. Yeah, it's I thought Patrick Reed, he had a disappointing Sunday. I thought he was going to be there this year. He was certainly looking like it. So yeah.
So we have a storage related question. Is NSA looking to take on new pros?
We are. We're always looking to take on pros, and we certainly look at the pro process as a great way to add great team members. Gain in scale. Really fill out our map as well. As you look at how this all fits together and how we get synergies and how we get all the group to really, not trip over one another. We're looking for pros within, nice places, geography across the United States. So yes, we're constantly in communication. Would love to talk to anybody about it. For me personally, it was a really, really, really good experience and continues to be a great experience. And so, yeah, I would highly recommend, if you're interested, please contact us.
Great. Just make sure we don't have any others. All right. Well, why don't we hit a little lightning round here with a few minutes left, and if somebody pops in with a question, we can. So, who's the greatest guitar player of all time?
I'm going with Eddie Van Halen. I think he just set what he did was phenomenal from a young age. So.
All right, we're going to take a break from lightning rounds because Ian keeps trying to get back to storage on us. What's been the most significant change that NSA has made to improve operations during COVID?
A couple of things come across. We from a marketing platform perspective, our cost of conversion shrank dramatically. We really got dialed in on how price and discount and competitive sets, and really that bottom end of the funnel converted. It's easy to drive a lot of stuff to the top end of the funnel, work its way down the middle, but really closing the deals up, we got very sharp on. And if you look through our expense control and what we're able to do with NOI, that all came across very well. And the pros, as they got dialed into that as well. I mean, we learned a lot. We're going to continue to learn a lot, but we really made great strides there.
You think that's something that you can maintain? I mean, you think general acquisition cost of customers is compressed, at least near term?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think we learned. I also think as you look at machine learning and what it continues to evolve and what continues to change, and as you look at the automated bidding process and we're really looking at all of our models top to bottom, from an output perspective and setting the right goals. And yeah, I think we can.
Yeah. Who's the greatest golfer of all time?
Tiger. I mean, I'd love to go back to maybe, Palmer or Nicklaus. I just think Tiger for as long as he held it and the amount of tournaments he won, and he was dominant. I mean, flat dominant when he was at it.
Yep.
So.
Who do you think is the most underrated PGA player?
I'm going with Webb Simpson. I mean, he's always around. He's in this top tier all the time, but nobody ever talks about Webb Simpson. He's just out there. So it's just crazy.
So this time next year, what's everybody going to be talking about self-storage related that we're not talking about now?
I'm afraid we might be saying what happened at the 90s. And I'm not meaning to talk about the year of the 90s. Fourth quarter is going to be probably the toughest comp we've seen in a long time, because normally we just don't have what's going on. And so, will occupancy levels settle into more normals? What will, revenues look like and expenses look like? It's going to be an interesting, I know we're trying to model it now, and it's a tough one. It really is hard to look into the future and see what the next fourth quarter is going to look like.
You guys obviously talk with the analysts, weekly, if not daily. Are they prepared and understanding of the fact that a lot of the quants models are not going to work with year-over-year comps? And are we going to see an equity? We're going to see pressure on equities that don't match operations, like we saw in 2016, was it 17?
Yeah. We're trying, and I think everybody is cognizant of it. I don't know. I don't know. I hope so. I think it's such a short window they study. You know what I mean? We're studying now. We already forgot about the third quarter. We're only worried about what's going on now, and I think in our conversations, we're certainly talking a lot about what a unique cycle we're in, and it is very unique. And having expectations, fair expectations, maybe looking at a 2-year window as a comp, and really what does expenses look like over 2 years? What should revenue look like over 2 years? That's how we're usually, we're thinking about our modeling as well as what does normal look like versus abnormal, and how do we fit these two together for next year?
Do you expect, are we going to push rates faster and earlier to try to make up for some of what was lost? Because, and I don't know, I don't want to necessitate the emergency filing of any 8Ks here, so I'll be careful with the question. But what we hear, at least from the private side, typical ECRIs are low single digits to maybe even low mid single digits. And this year, I think pretty much everybody put a cap on around 8% for those first 2 or 3 months that they hit. Do you suspect, not in the context of NSA, but in the broader context of the industry, are we going to go try to get some of that back? Or do you think it's just, it's a lost 9 months and we're going to move on?
I think industry-wide, people will be more assertive. I do. I think everybody will try to gather as much as they can. I think one of the headwinds that's in front of that, though, there's still a lot of restrictions out there. There's places where you can only push to a certain limit, and I think that applies to street rate, and it also applies to in-place tenants. And so if we go, a little tougher here with lockdowns, they keep getting extended, and I think that will maybe put a little bit more ceiling on how aggressive everybody can be. But I think as a general rule of thumb, people will take advantage of what's out there. High occupancies, good rental velocity, low move-outs. I think people will push.
Yeah, with all-time record occupancies, you're forcing a little bit of turnover may not be the end of the world, because to your point earlier, you can only push rates so many times on someone. So if they're on that 4th or 5th rate increase, maybe you want them to move out, and maybe the person that moves in at a lower rate, but you get, you've got 22 months worth of increases that you can hit that new tenant for. So
that's right. That's right. And
2 steps forward, 1 step back. And
yeah, I definitely agree. And you look where street rates are now versus what we're moving in June and July too. There may be some pressure on some earlier pushes too, because the replacement rate's a little bit better now. So.
Yep. I think we're about out of time. That's all that I had on my list of prepared questions. And
okay.
Most importantly, we got the wine and the golf and the guitars. So
that's what we wanted
to
accomplish. I would agree. And thanks for taking the time, Aaron. It's always great to talk to you. And it's I love this industry and I love the people in it. And I'm with you. We miss everybody, but everybody stay safe. And when the time comes, we'll all get back together again and get to have a little fun. So.
Great. Yeah, totally agree. Thank you. I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing everybody in person sooner rather than later.
Agreed. Stay safe and have a great holiday, okay?
Yep. Take care, everyone.
All right. Thanks.